Great. Okay, so we did that first part of the lecture. That was A, and we gave you a background to kind of encapsulation of really the thesis that Dan Gibson's coming up with. And now we're going to go into some of his newer material. Not the newest. There's still more material that I have to yet share with you. That'll be coming later. But he is specifically zeroing in on this whole notion that possibly Petra itself could be the original Mecca, not the name itself. There's no place called Mecca up there in Jordan. But if you look at the stages of the Hajj, you will probably see a lot of antecedents. You will see an awful lot of similarities, a good bit of parallels. So why don't we get into this? This is a good area that I'd like to share with you because it's important as we continue to ask, what do we know about the 7th century? What do we know about the 8th century? Let's go back and let's see what we now find way up there in Petra.
So let's go right into the PowerPoint and let's share screen. And let's start with, what about Petra itself? Can it be the former Mecca? What are the new findings we have found about this old city? Well, when you look at the valleys in Mecca, they just don't exist. And remember, the Islamic traditions say that Mecca is in a valley. In fact, the Quran, chapter 48, verse 24, says it's in a valley. But take a look at these maps. Can you see there is no valley there where Mecca is? Not in a valley, but Petra, now look at that map on the right there, is in a valley and has a parallel valley. You can see the two parallel valleys there next to each other, looking down on top of Petra from above. So that fits the traditional account and also fits the Quranic reference. Petra fits the biblical account as well. Hagar is in a valley going to one mountain and then the other, which fits Petra. And that's Marwa and Safa that we're going to talk about later. Abraham comes to talk to her and turns the corner out of sight, which is exactly what we would find with the cliffs in Petra known as Thenaya, or the turning to the right. Take a look at this image. You can see the Thenayas there, those long strands, green strands. Those are the Thenayas that would make sense if Abraham had come to find Hagar there. What's also interesting is that you take a look at this structure here that I've pictured, and that's the temple of Dushara. Who is Dushara? He is the senior god of the Nabatean pantheon. What's fascinating, that is his name, but that is not his title. His title is Ilaha, the god, which is where Allah comes from. And that's why on the coins that we're going to see next week, that name appears on the coin because they are the one that introduced that name of God. So Allah, the name for God, the name of God in the Quran, is not a name. It's nothing more than a title, the God. And where does it derive from? It derives from Petra, which most of Arabic that we use today comes from Nabatean Aramaic, which is, again, the language they use in Petra. Also interesting is that when you go to chapters 53, or Surah 53, ayah 19 to 20, known as the Satanic verses, we have the reference to the three goddesses, Alat, Al-Uzza, and Al-Manat. But Alat is the feminine form of Allah, means the goddess. Again, it's a title, the goddess. But Alat is the generic title for Al-Uzza, the goddess, who is the wife of Allah. So Allah has a wife. I had no idea, because I always thought God was one and has no consort. In chapter 6, verse 101 and 102 in the Quran, it's very clear that Allah does not have a wife, has no consort. Yet here, the very God that we see the Muslims using and that Islam uses and that the Quran uses is derived from the Nabatean god, Dushara, whose title is Ilaha, or Allah, who has a wife named Al-Uzza, whose title is Allah, the feminine form of Allah. So how could God be one if he has a wife? Petra is also where the best looking Kaaba is found. Now there is a square in the center of Petra. Take a look at that picture on the right, which looks like a Kaaba. See, it's larger than the present day Kaaba in Mecca. Why? Well, Muhammad ibn Abd Allah al-Azraqi was a 9th century Islamic commentator and historian and author of the book Kitab Akhbar Mecca, the book of the reports about Mecca. Now, he's reporting of the material that was given to him. So he's not the one that is actually writing it. He is taking the documents that he was given about this place called Mecca. And he gives the measurements that he has received of the Masjid al-Haram. Remember, he doesn't call it the Kaaba, he calls it the Masjid al-Haram, the forbidden place of bowing. And the earlier Kaaba, during Muhammad's time, And it has the exact same measurements as the square, which is in Petra today that you see encircled there. It has that measurement. The later built Kaaba in Mecca was built at a later date and does not have those dimensions. There you can see it on the right. So the reference points to the measurements of what the Kaaba should be fits Petra, not Mecca. Also, Al-Zaraqi talks about the temples that were built around the Kaaba, immediately around it, attached to it. If you look at the Petra Kaaba, you will see it does have temples around it. You can see that in the picture. The Meccan Kaaba, looking at the earlier pictures. Now, here's a picture from the 1800s to 1887, though two different pictures in the 19th century. The Kaaba stands completely alone. There are no temples around it, suggesting, therefore, that Al-Zaraqi is not talking about that Kaaba or Masjid al-Haram. When you go to Mecca today, you will find that long corridor known as the Safa and Marwa. Those are the two mountains. According to chapter 2, verse 158, they refer to these two mountains where the pilgrims run back and forth. And you can see in the picture on the bottom left where they're commemorating the search by Hagar for water. And she's looking for water for her son Ishmael. And she runs between these two mountains back and forth. And these are supposedly the two mountains that are there in Mecca today, Safa and Marwa. But when you take a look at them, those don't look like mountains to me. They look like little pieces of rock. They're only about 15 to 20 feet high. If these are mountains, why are they so small? And it looks like they've been placed there at a later date. Possibly they're there to symbolize it, but they certainly are not mountains. Now, when you go to Petra, you will find the two mountains of Safa and Marwa. They're named that. These mountains of Safa and Marwa have been discovered. There are ruined foundations on each with the remnants of what could be earlier Nabatean temples. Today, one can also see later ruins of an old church there that you can see on the right side of the picture. What about the Zamzam well? Well, according to Al-Bukhari, it refers to streams in Mecca in volume 2, hadith number 685. Yet there are no streams in Mecca at all. The most that you'll get is the Zamzam well, which is in Mecca, but it is not a stream. It is only one well and could not have accommodated all the caravans that Muslims tell us their approach to Mecca. There was no water at all. There still is hardly any water. It all has to be piped in from other sources. When you go to Petra, however, there are well and water systems. There's all kinds of water systems. They're still there today. And there are many wells. Possibly that's the Zamzam well they're referring to that you see in the upper right-hand picture. What about Muzdalifah? Muzdalifah is according to what is in Mecca today. Muslims stand and pray there until sunset, and on Mount Arafat or Mount Mercy, and then they spend the night in the plain of Muzdalifah. Now, Petra has a mountain. If you look at the one in Mecca, it's miles away from the Kaaba, but the one in Petra, it's right there. It's a huge mountain, has a slippery slope, and it has a mosque and the ancient church on the top, and at least 5,000 people can easily stand and pray on it, which fits what the traditions say, exactly what they used it for. And then you get to the Jamarats. The Jamarat are these pillars, 3 of them that are in Mecca, where people throw anywhere from 49 to 72 stones at these 3 devils. Today, it has now become 3 pillars, which were exposed in the upper left, but to now, most recently, they have now enclosed those 3 pillars. You can see the upper right picture. But here's the question, why 3 Jamarats? Are there 3 devils? I always thought there was only 1 devil. So what in the world are 3 devils doing in Mecca? When you go to Petra, you will find the Jamarat there. There's a picture in the bottom right. And it is only 1 pillar because there's only 1 devil. So it looks like the Jamarat has its antecedents in Petra, not in Mecca. So the need for a place was already in place. Petra has all the stations of the pilgrimage which are now found in Mecca. A square, the Kaaba, with the exact dimensions mentioned by Al-Zaraqi, which does not fit the present-day Kaaba in Mecca, but does there in Petra. The Safa and Marwa mountains, to commemorate Hagar looking for water, are in Petra with places for idols at the top, and not little rocks as we find in Mecca, but actually full mountains. The washing of water with cisterns and waterways are in Petra, not in Mecca, which only has 1 well, the Zamzam well. And the plain of Muzdalifah, a slippery slope mountain with a mosque and church on it at the top, and where at least 5,000 people could pray, is only found in Petra. The Jamarat platform with the pillar to throw 49 to 72 rocks is also found in Petra, not the 3 platforms in Mecca, suggesting 3 different devils. Dan's conclusions on Petra. According to his latest findings, he says the traditions tell us that Mecca is in a valley, yet Mecca isn't while Petra is. The Thenaya cliffs are not in Mecca, but they can be found extensively in Petra. The Quranic god Allah and the goddess Allat and Al-Uzza are uniquely from Petra, not Mecca. And then you have all the stations on the pilgrimage referred to in the earliest texts are found in Petra. In fact, everything the Quran, the traditions speak of can be found in Petra and are more realistic and much more historical.
Okay, so there you have it. A tour de force, you might say, by Dan Gibson, bringing all this new evidence. Well, new in the sense it's new to us, but it's not new to those who are living up in Jordan. It's not new to people who have been doing research in this area, though they are so few, and they haven't gone public like Dan has gone public with his research. And that's why it's exciting. I was fascinating because as I was reading and I was looking and I was viewing his books and articles and also his newest videos, as he went from one area to another, just showing the parallels between Mecca and Petra, you have to wonder, well, really, then have they not really? How? This sounds to a reason. If you have the Abbasids, who really don't come into power until 749, they hate the Umayyads. They hate everything about the Umayyads. They don't want anything to do with the Umayyads. They want to create their own narrative. That's why their narrative doesn't even begin to appear until 833 and 870 and 875 and 923, much, much later. Then it stands to reason that they're going to take much of what has gone before and refigure it into a completely new history, a whole new narrative. And that narrative does not exist in Petra. It would exist in Mecca. That's where the black stone was. And that whoever has the black stone, there you have the power of God, or you have God's presence. That's why as soon as Ibn Zubayr took the black stone with him down to the south, aligned himself with the Abbasids, who then come to power in 749, who then write their first history in 765, what Ibn Ishaq, that was then redone, completely refigured and abridged, or maybe even enlarged by Ibn Hisham in 833, and then that becomes the new narrative. And with that new narrative, then they've got to then produce all the sayings, and that's not till 870, as then you take these 600,000 of these sayings and whittle them down to 7,397, as Al-Bukhari did. You only retain that story that you want, and that story is not in Petra, it's down in Mecca. But it has many of the same things that are in Petra. And I just listed them all as Dan was bringing these up, and there's 9 of these areas. Number 1, Petra has the valleys that we read about in the traditions and also in the Quran. Number 2, if Abraham had gone to these Thenayas to find Hagar, they would have been in Petra. Those Thenayas are there that we read about in the Bible. The name Allah, the name Allat, both Allah and Allat, these are as we now know today, the generic titles for the gods of Dushara and Al-Uzza. These are in Petra, though they are in the Quran. Right through the Quran, Allah's name has been used. Nothing new, nothing exciting about that. And that, if we see on the coins, as we're going to see later on, the coins, the name of Allah is all on all the coins, because that is the name that was then adopted by all the Arabs in that area. So that's not a surprise. But it's fascinating that the Arabic in the Quran also comes from Petra, from this Aramaic that is from the Nabatean area. That is the Arabic that we now have in the Quran. And that's why it's fascinating that it all seems to be pointing there, all this area from what we now know today. And then what I love is what Dan Gibson did by pinpointing these 5 different stages of the Hajj, the pilgrimage. All these 5 stages are much more correct in Petra than they are in Mecca. The Kaaba fits Petra, the Safa and Marwa mountains fit Petra, the Zamzam well, it doesn't even, we don't know of a Zamzam well of any of the traditions, we know of streams, and those fit Petra. The Muzdalifah and the Arafat, the plain and the mountain, they all fit Petra, and the Jamarat tower fits Petra, not 3 but 1. So all of this seems to fit Petra, suggesting that that was the antecedent to the Mecca we have today. That was the Umayyad, and even earlier that the Nabatean sanctuary, which and then the Abbasids took and then refigured and reformed and rebuilt down there in Mecca sometime in the 8th century. Fascinating, fascinating. But you know, there's going to be some criticism of this, and that's what we're going to do next. We're going to go into the criticism, because people are criticizing. Specifically, Dr. David King is very critical. So we're going to head into that next. Stay with us. Write your comments. Engage with this new material. This is new material. I'm sure it's the first time many of you have heard of it. So we need to unpack it. We need to understand it. We need to engage with it. We need to respond to it. And we need to come to new conclusions. And that's what we want you to do. So do that in the comments at the bottom. Okay, this is Jay. Over and out.